Okay, so today I want to talk about the Big Five personality model and how to help a couple understand their major personality differences, where they clash the most in their personalities. That those tend to be what they call the perpetual problems in Gottman, right? So the areas of their personality where you're the most different creates kind of a tension in needs or tendencies, and that tension can leads to just a perpetual necessity to manage the ongoing tension. It's not going to go anywhere, but you can get better at managing it, understanding it, showing up to love each other, making sacrifices or gifts to the other. By working on your own tendencies, softening out your personality and where it is the most extreme, right? So a lot of times when I'm explaining this to couples, we say, like, you get a lot of extroverts and introverts together. You tend to find people that are together with somebody who is very different in at least one personality aspect, because that difference makes the other person mysterious, intriguing, exciting. They're able to show up and do things in a way that you can't, you know? So if I'm an introvert and my partner's an extrovert, I tend to be kind of a calming, restorative force within the relationship, and make sure that we fight for our quiet time, our family time. And then my partner tends to be the one that is getting us out there, that is connecting with people, that is more excitable and joyful and upbeat and energetic and bouncy, right? So we have somebody that is more calm, more grounded, more relaxed, more internalized, with somebody who's more externalized, more joyful, more bouncy, more energetic, right? And that can be a wonderful partnership. You can show up and hone your roles within the family so that you have good community connections, you have good energy when it is appropriate, and then you also have rest and restorative calm when that is appropriate, and protect the sanctity of your home from potential drains on resources, right? So you want to understand where the personality difference is, and then understand each person's role as being positive with that personality trait as a strength. Because what happens when there is a mismanagement of that conflict, you can develop a contempt narrative around the other person's extreme personality trait, right? That is different from your own. So if I am the extrovert and I have an introvert partner, my contempt narrative is that they are boring, that they are slow, that they're not able to talk, that they can't get their ideas out, right? That they're not exciting, interesting, fulfilling, there when I am high and having fun. So that's a contempt narrative, and it's very, very dangerous. It can lead to a buildup of resentment, a feeling of moral superiority, and just create a lot of emotional distance between the two partners, right? Danger, danger, danger. Contempt is the number one most dangerous, poisonous four horsemen, right? So you call that out with and try to help the couple understand their personality, where the major differences lie, and understand what their potential contempt narratives are, and be very honest about those, explore them, be radically vulnerable with each other, and then also actively and regularly hone their narratives of fondness and admiration around the personality trait that is very different, right? So if I'm the extrovert, I really want to understand what it is that my introvert partner really brings to the table in their introversion. What are the major strengths and gifts and benefits that come to our family because of that introversion, right? So with the Big Five model, there's 5 major domains with 2 subcategories each that you want to understand and be able to recognize in the couple over time, or use you can use in the beginning the understandmyself.com and have that as part of your assessment, and then be able to identify the obvious places where they're super different, and then just focus on those as kind of you do your assessment and are curious about what the stories are that both have of the other surrounding those major differences, right? So that can be a whole session right there, and very beautiful and powerful for the couple to be able to recognize that, talk to each other about it, and then begin their work on their fondness and admiration stories. And then use that also to craft their role in the household that's going to really highlight their personality strengths, and steer them clear of tasks or roles that are, more the strength of the other and that are their weakness, right? So it's like we definitely want to make sure that I'm doing the stuff that's easy and fulfilling for me, that energizes me and lifts me up. That's my obvious role.
Hello! Ah!
And makeup. Doing some makeup today. Mwah. Oh. Say hi, George. Hi. Where were we? Okay, so yeah, practicing admiration and fondness narratives. Beware of contempt narratives. Big Five. The Big Five model. So we'll break down the Big Five model. Big Five model is OCEAN, is the acronym OCEAN. Openness to new experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeability, and neuroticism. So openness to new experience is kind of like how risk-taking, creative, flexible, liberal a personality tends to be, right? The higher you are in openness to new experience, the more creative, interested in art, music, new ideas, and learning, trying new things, that sort of thing. The lower you are, the more conservative you're going to be in terms of taking risks. You like to stick with things that are known and safe and normal. You're not going to want to push the boundaries too much. So a more conservative personality type versus a more liberal, more creative versus more logical, grounded, right? So as you explain the differences to couples, you want to make sure that you are highlighting kind of the strengths-focused vision of the extremes of the highs and lows of each dimension. So, like, as a clinician, you're helping them craft those fondness and admiration narratives versus the contempt ones. So, if someone is high in openness, culturally for us, that's a better thing, right? So we just want to make sure that we're reinforcing that it's not better or worse. Every personality type has its strengths and limitations. They are merely adaptations to social and environmental stressors. Everybody has a kind of a different strategy based on the culture, the family, the environment where they were raised, and that's interacting with their genetics. So your personality is a survival mechanism that developed in response to the threats and stressors that you were facing. So whatever adaptation you have, it's going to be very well suited to very particular types of stressors and challenges, and very terrible at others that you weren't exposed to, or just weren't in your kind of survival adaptation strategy, right? So being more conservative personality-wise versus more liberal personality-wise, they're just two different strategies for potentially different sets of challenges, and they're going to have their strengths and limitations depending on what environment they're in, right? So one thing I use to just hammer home this point is like, you can't judge a monkey by its ability to swim or a fish by its ability to climb a tree, right? Your personality type has its unique abilities and limitations, and you want to know those and then know how you can show up for each other to have the most advantageous partnership, right? We don't want it to be a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. You're just different, and we want to really kind of leverage and utilize those differences, not see them as, inherently bad. Right? Oh my goodness me. So people who are higher in openness, higher in extroversion, higher in agreeability, lower in neuroticism, those are like the preferred personality types. So people who are higher in feeling negative emotion or higher in neuroticism, and are like lower in openness and introverted, like they can be very self-conscious about their personality type. So you just want to make sure you highlight the strengths as you walk the couple through an understanding of themselves and each other, right? Particularly with the test, you want to be careful because people, when they're interpreting those results, there's in openness, it breaks it down into intellect and openness to new experience. Those are the two subdomains of openness. And intellect is not IQ. make sure that you read through that section with the couple, or like point it out that like if you're low in intellect, it doesn't mean you're low in intelligence, right? It just means that you're more grounded and interested in practical things versus abstract things. You're more of a concrete person who's interested in practicality versus abstraction, art, creativity. You know, it's not a preferred personality type. You know, it's going to be better at certain challenges than others, right? It's like we need our engineers just as much as we need our artists, right? So you point that out. Somebody who is low in intellect actually can make a much better engineer than somebody who is really high in intellect, who's kind of has their head more in the clouds, you know. So sometimes I share kind of a little bit of pieces of the weaknesses of the intense personality traits that we would deem culturally to be more desirable, right? So if you're, you know, very artistic, and you're very interested in abstract ideas, you can actually have a hard time relating to people and being more down to earth, more grounded, kind of more humble, right? Okay, so just important, point out strengths and weaknesses of those intense personality traits and have the couple develop an understanding of that, right? So that's openness to new experience, which is the first one in Ocean, openness to new experience. Then you have conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is broken down into two pieces, industriousness and orderliness, right? So conscientious people are very hardworking. That's the industriousness. Like you always need to be, if you're very high in industriousness, you need to be using your hands all the time, getting things done, producing. You're going to feel very uncomfortable and distressed if you're not able to produce and get things done. It's going to be very hard to relax and to take your time. So people who are high in industrious, very, very productive. Again, that's one that our culture would be like, oh, that's good. If you're high in industriousness, that's good. If you're low in industriousness, that's bad. Again, not the case. So somebody who's lower in industriousness is going to be able to be more, it's calmer. You know, you're going to be calmer. You're going to be able to rest. You're going to be able to exist in environments where you have to be more patient. There's not something happening all the time. There's not something to produce or do all the time. And you need to be able to be calm and patient and not always need to be acting, right? And so somebody who is lower in industriousness is going to be able to relax, have some more fun, be focused on some of the good things in life, and not always need to be working really hard. So if you have a couple that have this major difference, you can help them see that, like, okay, you're helping each other out, you're balancing each other out, and that one person is going to be the person that's pointing to all the stuff that needs to get done and make sure you're on top of things. And the other person is going to make sure that you have fun, that you're focused on the good things, that you're able to relax and rest and be able to go on vacations and stuff like that. So you have different champions of different needs within the family, right? Okay, industriousness. And then the other piece of conscientiousness is orderliness. And orderliness is like how neat and clean and controlled you need your life to be. Your home, your schedule, your relationships, how much control and order you need to have within your environment. So very high, people who are very high in orderliness need their environment to be like sparkling clean. You know, a drop on the sink is going to really bother them. They need things to be wiped up, clean, in control. And if it's not, it's going to be very frustrating. It's just going to create a lot of tension in their body. So it's kind of, it doesn't mean that they can't deal with more chaos, but it's just going to be more difficult, right? And then people who are lower in orderliness, again, the kind of the negative in our culture, people who are lower in orderliness are going to be more comfortable with chaos. They're going to be able to be more flexible. They can operate more calmly in a disordered environment where things are all over the place. So it's not going to be as much of a mental and energy drain to be surrounded by chaos, right? So these types of people are very, very helpful when things are all over the place, or that spontaneous action, spontaneous problem solving is required in a multifactorial problem, right? Where there's a lot changing regularly, and you can't really predict what's going to happen next, right? So one side, high level of orderliness, very good for somebody who is creating and maintaining a systems and kind of in a big organization, very helpful to have very conscientious people, and then or that have high orderliness, and then somebody who's like responding to emergencies or like highly complex tasks, like socializing is a highly complex task that's always changing. So if you're lower in orderliness, you might actually have a leg up in being personable and responding well to kind of social demands. So yeah. All right, so that's the second one, conscientiousness. So we have so far openness, conscientiousness, and then extroversion. Extroversion is broken down into enthusiasm, which is like how bouncy, bubbly, energetic you are as a person. And it's also broken down into assertiveness, which is how direct you are, how much you want to be a leader, how much you want to influence people, how much you kind of go for social status, how important that is to you, how much you feel compelled to go for those sorts of things. So in that, we look at the other sides, right? So it's like, obviously in our culture, the extroversion is highly valued. And somebody who's lower in extroversion might feel poorly about that within the relationship, or it might be really easy for the extroverted person to fall into a contemptuous narrative of the introverted person. So introversion is more like you think inside your head, you form thoughts there first, and then you say it when you feel like it's correct. Extroverted person is going to just be thinking out loud, blah, right? So an introverted person can be more kind of what they say is more firm, grounded, real, what they really think, and it's more well developed, and it can take more time to do that. And then an extrovert, it can kind of play with ideas and change them and develop them over time in the air in front of you. Yeah. Enthusiasm and assertiveness. So you be careful with assertiveness. It's like somebody who's higher in assertiveness with somebody who's lower in assertiveness, right? If you have a big difference there, then the person who's very high in assertiveness will very likely dominate a lot of the conflict, conversation, plans, roles. Though they're likely to get what they want at the expense of the other. If the other person is low in assertiveness, they're going to, or even just like, even if they're just normal and the other person is very high in assertiveness, then the person who's lower is likely to lean into being more submissive, giving up more on what they want, not kind of pushing for things that are going to be healthy, good, restorative, uplifting for them, right? So that just needs to be understood within the dynamic. Right. Agreeability is the next domain. Agreeability is broken down into compassion and politeness. Compassion is how much you prioritize other people and other people's interests, feelings, needs above your own. So again, that on the face value of that sounds like, well, if you're high in compassion, that's the good thing. If you're low in compassion, that's a bad thing. Right. So personality-wise, people who are lower in compassion can be champions of their own family's priorities, needs, protect resources, and understand how to stick up for themselves and stick up for their families, versus somebody who may be very, very high in compassion may not be able to do that and maybe have a very, very hard time protecting their resources, their family, their needs over the needs of other people. And they may be more, it's like can give away everything at the expense of themselves and potentially collapse, right? So typically you find that men in the relationship are lower in compassion and women are higher in compassion. Not always, obviously, but that's kind of can pop up. So you want to kind of, you can help the couple to develop a sense of what their roles are in that area. It'd be very helpful for a man to be lower in compassion because he can protect and provide for the family and make sure people are safe and focus on the interests of the family rather than the needs of others, and very, very helpful for the woman to be focused on the needs of others, for raising kids and for nurturing and responding to the emotional needs of those around. So it can be a very nice combination for the roles in the family and how we show up. We just don't want to expect each other to be equal in all things, like abilities wise or energy wise. Really, it's just about how much energy it takes, right? So it's not that somebody who's low in compassion is not going to think about the needs of others or not prioritize the needs of others or not be nice or loving. It's just that when considering the needs of others and working on that, it's going to take more energy, more effort, not be as second nature, right? So it's going to be second nature to protect and provide, less so to sacrifice and serve other people outside, the current projects. So people in business, more successful people in business tend to be lower in agreeability. And that's because they can kind of prioritize, push for their projects and protect them from potential threats and drains of energy and resources. So, all right. And again, it doesn't mean you're an asshole, right? You can still be loving and polite and talk with, love. The next piece of agreeability is politeness. Politeness is like how much of a rebel you are versus how much of a rule follower you are. So people who are high in politeness, they kind of follow the letter of the law. They're very focused on doing things the way that they're supposed to be done, to social norms and conventions and expectations. And then somebody who's lower in politeness is more likely to be a rebel, have a difficult time with authority, not want to listen to authority, and push for their own way. They're going to be the rebels. It's going to be more difficult for them to follow the grain than to go against the grain. And again, you can think about these personality traits, like how much energy and effort does it require for you to do something versus do another thing. So to go with the grain, if you're high in politeness, if you're a very polite person in terms of personality trait, if you're very polite, then the easiest thing to do is go with the grain. If you are low in politeness, the easiest thing to do is going to be to go against the grain. And both have their advantages and disadvantages, right? Just what is going to take you more energy and effort to do. So that's agreeability. The last one is neuroticism. Neuroticism is kind of like a dirty word now in our culture. Basically, how I explain it to couples is that it's sensitivity to negative emotion. It's just how loud is the emotional noise that you experience. So people who are very high in neuroticism feel negative emotion to a more intense degree. It's kind of a louder emotional noise that's right there in front of their face. It's like impossible to ignore. And then people who are lower in neuroticism experience negative emotion kind of like a more softer noise. It's easier to ignore or to not pay attention to. So the two components of neuroticism are they're to do with conflict a lot of the times. It's withdrawal and volatility. So withdrawal is your basically intensity of anticipatory anxiety. So how much do you feel anxiety for upcoming events that you consider to be potentially threatening or difficult or challenging? And that's like social withdrawal. It's like your tendency to engage in avoidance because of that anxiety, right? Obviously, facing something that you perceive very intensely to be threatening is difficult. So if you're high in withdrawal, it means that you feel a lot of intense anxiety that will increase your avoidance tendencies. You'll tend to be more avoidant of social stressors, tend to be more avoidant of anything that is perceived as a threat, because you're getting the noise that this is a threat very loud. So it makes it very uncomfortable. So people who are low in withdrawal don't necessarily feel that anticipatory anxiety as intensely, right? And then volatility. Volatility I describe as like the strength of your fight or flight response. So how powerfully do you feel sadness, anger, frustration? Like it's like to the intensity to which you feel all the other negative emotions and how powerfully you respond in a fight or flight situation. So how aggressively do you engage in fight? How aggressively do you engage in flight? So that's kind of, you can understand it by the the fight or flight manifestation of, and the intensity of that will indicate the intensity of the emotions generally, right? So who is more volatile, who has a more difficult time of managing their emotions? And so, you know, that person, okay, so then like, how do you interpret that positively, right? Because again, within our society, it's like people who are more aggressive, more volatile, more reactive, and have a harder time controlling themselves emotionally, that's a bad thing. So what you help the couple understand is that, well, sensitivity to negative emotion is like your ability to perceive threats at varying degrees. So when it's an obvious threat, it's a very loud emotional noise. But if it's something that is like a threat that is not so obvious, then you're going to be able to detect it before anybody else. Your sensitivity to threat detection is higher. So you could potentially spot trouble way before it comes and be very helpful in the family and in the relationship, and being able to call that out, bring attention to rising threats before they are looming large in our life. You know, so very, very potentially powerful to have somebody in the relationship that has a higher neuroticism, because they can perceive things before other people can, right? And then obviously very helpful to have somebody lower in neuroticism, because they can keep their cool in difficult situations, and help the other person to calm and regulate their really loud emotional experience, right? So those are the 5 domains of personality. Very helpful for couples to understand where they fall along those domains. And even if you just present it in that way, most people are pretty good at indicating where they fall along those domains. Sometimes not so easy because of the the bias. So somebody who's very low in intellect might not be willing to admit that they're low in intellect, even though that in its own right, that's a major superpower, because it helps you to be more grounded, to be more focused on the nuts and bolts, practicality, rather than be lost in abstract thought. So the better you do at presenting this and helping people see that no matter what their personality breakdown, it has its major strengths and limitations no matter what. And you know, it's really just helpful to know where you are in reality, so that, you know, if you want to mindfully work on some things or adjust some things in your personality, to better suit your partner, to better suit your family, to better suit the situation you're in, great. But it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's like, there are difficult personalities to manage depending on the environment and situation, but all of our personalities developed as threat adaptations. So, you know, it's like, understand what makes your personality a superpower, and put yourself in roles and environments and situations where that superpower will really shine, right? Okay, so that's a little breakdown of that. Let me know if you have any questions or needs or thoughts. We can discuss together. All right, thanks.